Moving Fundraising Forward, a podcast on how to get the most out of your fundraising while building a stronger team. Today we're going to be talking about the abundance and scarcity mindset with Jim Boshin, Rob Pike, and special guest JVMaloney.
Thank you for joining us today. Jim Boshin, Rob Pike, JVMaloney. We're having a conversation today a bit around scarcity and abundance and fundraising. It's a good thing we can edit this later.
Yeah, it's always good we can edit. That's part of the abundance mindset. Yeah, for me, just having that dialogue, a lot of my clients right now are hearing the words abundance, and therefore they're starting to apply scarcity without knowing it. And so I think just tackling this as a conversation for people to start getting their minds around, because I'm starting to see some of my clients, especially in the social impact space, trip up and not make good decisions.
Yeah, please.
Why would they not make good? How did that affect their decision making from what you were seeing?
Yeah, the great thing, and I know we'll all end with what's the one takeaway. Here's my takeaway: don't make it a verse, make it an end. So you want to talk about abundance and scarcity,
Yeah.
And there's times you need an abundance mindset, and times you better have a scarcity mindset when you're making decisions. Where they're tripping up is they're not giving themselves permission to talk in both. They've made it an either or, and so
Right.
some organizations.
And I would imagine too that they judge that if abundance
Yes.
is the better of the two, then scarcity has got to be the lesser of the two.
Yep.
And people who engage in scarcity, which has to do with management, and management is important, that you can begin to think that management itself maybe is not as good as the abundant fundraiser person, and we need to be careful of that.
Can you talk a bit more about the scenarios and what you'd encounter, a scarcity mindset, so to speak, in philanthropy versus an abundance mindset? So, especially as it relates to some of the types of missions that we work with that have to relate to healthcare, cause-based, those types of things. And what would you see, maybe, let's say, in a healthcare setting?
There's I could get into a story that will probably go on too long, so I'll skip the story. And one of the things had to do with an observation that one of the development officers that we had, and she was from Kentucky. And one of the things that she was talking about is that the storyline, or the way she presents a fundraising presentation, she was speaking more about herself, but was also an observation of other development people, is that because she was always exposed to internal meetings, corporate meetings, and the higher up you go in an organization, once you get the title manager or anything of that equivalent, you tend to go to meetings. And you tend to be exposed to the scarcity conversation, which has to do with the management of an organization so it doesn't die. But after a while, you can get onto that track, you can get onto that channel. And after a while, when you speak to people outside of the box, you may begin to represent the story from a scarcity telling rather than an abundance telling.
Yeah, I think let's tighten up those terms for people a little bit, because that'll help frame them up. Because I see that all the time, especially in the larger institutions. Scarcity. I'm not going to have what I need to do what I want to do. I don't have enough money in the bank. I don't have enough time. I don't have the right people, whatever it is. Abundance mindset. I've got everything I need to do, or it's going to show up, so I get to do whatever I want to do. The money will always be there. The right people will always be there. I'll always have enough time. And these are barbells that cause a lot of stress.
They do.
Yeah.
And I think too around that is that in terms of the message, we're messaging to the community, we're messaging to internally. The thing that the philanthropic part of the house can do is provide that abundance conversation. So when you're talking with the board, you're talking with your supporters, you're speaking to that piece of it. So can you talk a bit about what you consider to be that abundance conversation, that building of that trust with the community around things that are needed, but also the why?
I'm going to go back to scarcity for just a moment. If you were speaking to a philanthropist about the mission of the organization, you can shade what you're saying essentially by if you don't give us money, either a bad thing will happen or a good thing will not be able to happen. Now that's a scarcity presentation. an abundance presentation is if you can be involved with what we do, better things will take place because of you. It will be because that you believe in what we're doing, you understand what we're doing, and I want you to be a part of what we're doing. It's subtle, but if you're not careful, you can end up putting yourself into the beggar's position. And that shows. And I know it may take, this conversation
the handout
it's
feeling,
a handout. You know, I need
that's where a lot of
I need money and you've got it.
Yeah, that's where a lot of executives don't want to be. They don't want to be in the handout. They see themselves as a for-profit industry, not a non-for-profit industry. And there's so many wonderful things you can do with a non-for-profit setting, but they don't want to be in the handout holding business.
You know, and many organizations, you know, they manage their resources with great precision, especially the higher up you go in any larger organization, a university or a college or a hospital, you know, a larger organization. But one of the things then that happens is that they're proud of their work and they're good at it. And I think sometimes when we speak about abundance, we need to be also careful on the internal messaging that we are not belittling their work. And I don't know, Rob, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm going to role play a scenario that we went through years ago, working a capital campaign, small rural community. We needed, the hospital had been there for like 40, 52 years, I forget, a long time. But there was no air conditioning in a hot, humid area, right? There was no, all the new wiring was outside, so you could see it and it was in the rooms. So of course they need a new campaign. Well, you know, in healthcare, a lot of times you're lucky, you should leverage the system to upfront a lot of the capital costs, but you can't be as good as you want to be without philanthropy. That's why people do it. Well, the scarcity mindset was, if we don't do this, we're going to have to stay in this building for another 40 years. It's just not a powerful message for a lot of people, right? So we had to shift that and say, no, if we do this well, what happens? And all of a sudden, and it is this weird dynamic that you're talking about, Jay, the doctors and the management team had their head around, this is an issue if we don't have the money. Therefore, we're going to talk in scarcity. If we don't have this, we're in here for the next 40 years. Where once they flipped to permission to talk around, well, if we had all the money, what would we actually be able to do with it?
What would the new place be
what
like?
Would, and that's, you know, and then it was fun to watch as a professional. They flipped gears, and you've seen this. Yeah. All of a sudden, like, if we did this, we could save this many more people. If we did this, we'd be able to do this.
You keyed on something I think is really interesting, is permission. If you can talk a bit more about that, about the giving of permission to speak to this. That concept, that idea.
Yeah, most people have never been given the permission to think other than managing the dollars. But I think part of that is also just the awareness that there are two sides, and you have to have two different brains in this business to be good at it, right? So if you're running your own business, you have to believe you can go out and get as much money as you need to run a good business. From a management side, from a scarcity, you have to be smart with your money so you don't actually run out of business no matter what happens.
Right.
So most of the time when we're talking with people that are working the numbers internally, they've never actually had permission to dream from a human dynamic of team dynamics.
You know, I think, Jim, there's another piece of this thing, which is, I think the phrase would be controlling your own inner narrative, and to be aware of how you're seeing things. If we approach this thing, you know, as a technical class of some sort, you know, just say these things, don't say those things, we're still avoiding the idea of controlling your own inner narrative. And the inner narrative is that you need to, when on the inside, respect the people who are managing scarcity.
Yeah.
And they need to truly
if they don't do that, none of us have a job.
And they need to truly believe that you believe that.
Yep.
You know, and so on your inner narrative, when you talk to them and listen to them, you need to understand them. On the other side of it, in terms of controlling your inner narrative, when you're talking to people about abundance, you need to be able to change that channel. And that's a matter of practice and conversation.
Let me ask you, Jens, do you still have to work on that? Because I've been in this business for a long time now. Got the gray hair with
I always am working at that.
Where's that come from? Because I think most people think, well, if you're a great fundraiser, it's not an issue. Yeah, you've raised a lot of money. You've coached a lot of people. Where's that coming from?
You know, there's, I think, another phrase or two here, success and significance. people who have been successful got their, one is they were able to manage um, scarcity,
Yep.
and they also understood where the abundance was. They made money because they had a dream, but they didn't kill themselves and go out of business. So those are kind of special people. But the person who has become successful will generally not give generously until they choose, until their inner narrative speaks to them about significance. Not everyone needs to get to significance, and not everyone does. And for people who don't, it's their money. If they want to have another house in Hawaii, they earned it.
It's their money.
But there are some people who have begun to think of their significance in the world. That's also part of your own inner narrative. Is assume that of somebody.
Yep.
Assume that they care as much as the other people you surround yourself with. There's so much inner conversation that we need to have. But your point is, I've been doing this and I can't stop. I have to remind myself all through it that I need to I need to control my inner narrative, because I will tend to go to scarcity. That is a bias that I have.
Yep.
I think, as we go back to this whole abundance and scarcity piece, I think one of the things one of my favorite stories, Jay, that you talk about is that whole Disney idea about between Walt and Roy and the whole abundance versus scarcity piece. And I'd love to have you talk to, a real world example of something that everybody can relate to when we're talking about this.
Well, without taking up too much time, when our little girls, when our 40-year-old daughters were little girls, we would go to Disney World, and they were happy, they were delighted, and then after a couple of visits, you begin to think about how do these people here, how are so many people uniformly engaging with me personally? How does that happen? And then over time, you become kind of enamored with the management model of the Disney Corporation. So when we were all doing the stuff with Catholic Health Initiatives, we got a whole bunch of development officers on airplanes from all over the country. We flew down to Disney World, and we had I think like a 2.5-day presentation from the Disney Institute, which is their consulting division, and they have a number of key corporate values, one of which is leadership. So that was the one that we picked. So they sent us off on maybe the second day. They sent us up. They put us in the expensive, beautiful coaches. They weren't buses. They were coaches. So we go on those things, and we go on the back door of one of the theme parks. And we had been given these assignments beforehand by the moderator. We're on these tables of 8, and we had all been given a little assignment, and to what was the relationship of Mickey Mouse with, it sounds silly, but it wasn't. So one of the things that we all had to do before we could get back on the bus was to look at this like 12-minute bio of Walt Disney. And in it, one of the things that happened was that right after World War I, he had been an illustrator, and he had a product called Oswald Rabbit. And Oswald Rabbit was being distributed by a company that over time, it became Universal Studios. Many iterations earlier, it had another name. And anyway, they called him into New York City, and he and Mrs. Disney were given a nice dinner. And sit down, Walt. We got good news for you. Oswald is making a bucket of money. The bad news is we own Oswald. We own Oswald.
Yeah. Not Walt Disney.
Not you, Walt.
Not the artist.
Not you.
Yeah.
Another piece of the bad news today, Walt, is that we own your illustrators. So we own your product, and we own your illustrators. Have a good trip home.
Yeah.
But congratulations, it's doing really well.
But congratulations, Oswald is making good money here. So anyway, what happened then, kind of long story, not as long as it, could possibly be. Walt's brother, Roy, would have been the person we would speak of as the scarcity kind of guy. And he was somewhat transactional. Walt was classically the abundance kind of guy.
The dreamer.
The dreamer. He was the abundance personality. And Roy and Walt didn't, there were times when they wouldn't talk to each other for years at a time. Their relationship was intimately intense. So anyway, what Roy said to Walt is, I told you, I told you, I told you. You need to have someone look at these contracts before you sign them. So long story, almost done. We're now back in the meeting room, in our tables of 8, and the moderator's walking around. What did you learn? And all of these kinds of things. And one of the, I can't remember I just forgot her name, but she was from Kentucky, and she stood up and she said the aha that she had was that she and probably all of us were talking about the Roy story. We were talking about scarcity. We were talking about the transactional
in our
business.
home environments where we came from.
Where we come from. Yeah. And the conclusion, or not the conclusion, but the reason that happened was because when you get into suits, when you start to become a suit, what do suits do? They go to meetings. And when you go to the meetings, all of the conversations have to do with scarcity. And you can get infected with that. And that's what we were talking about a little while ago, about control your inner narrative. Don't mock it. I mean, these people are really good at managing scarcity. But on the other hand, our investors don't need to hear the Roy story.
They want to hear the dream story.
They want to hear the dream
Show me
story.
Disneyland.
They want to hear the dream story.
Yeah, they want to put the gold on top of the castle so they can see it and feel they made a difference in the park and their investment and what they were doing. And I think in some ways that's how it translates to, in philanthropy, to the executive going out into the community, having those conversations about the dream, the hope, the vision. And yes, you have to be practical, and you need a Roy.
Yeah,
but I don't think that it's not that side of the story that's going to bring in the investors. It's not going to bring in, and we call the investors too, our supporters that help us make that impact. We need the dreamers,
and
to a degree.
We need them fully, but we also need scarcity fully. And I think this is So I'm talking to
there is a need.
A client
it's not all
today.
dreams. There is a need.
There are needs.
Well,
yeah.
there's a need, and also just what I tell people is be ready for the whiplash. If you do this well, you have whiplash. I'm out there and I'm talking to people that they don't want to talk about management. They want to do something great with their funds. They want to dream big with you.
Make a difference.
And all of a sudden you go out and you come back and someone's, well, how'd the meeting go, Jim?
Yeah.
And instantly you have to report on scarcity mindset.
Right.
And so there's this whiplash as soon as you walk back into the door. And I try to get teams to say, okay, well, you want both. Just declare when you're in both. So somebody like, listen, I'm in abundance mode. I need you to think big. I need you not to be afraid.
Bear with me for a while here.
And when we go out, it's all abundance. Now, when I come back in here, I'm going to go scarcity, but you have to be as scared as I am now, which is you're not asking me how the meeting went. You're asking me when will the money hit the door, and that's a different dynamic. And that's why part of why we got together is data. Right, part of this is how to use data to help not make that scarcity mindset stop you from being abundance outdoor, because you can ask all you want from a scarcity mindset. You will never really give the gift that prospect is asking you to do.
Rob, I think you hit on something here as well. When in the idea of going out to present the opportunity as a team, a good development officer and the CEO or whomever the boss is together ought to be able to do really well. And sometimes, though, well, when you think of it, if you're the head of an organization, basically a lot of good news doesn't always come your way. A lot of what your day is dealing with stuff that no one else can figure out, and there's a lot of stress to that. On the other hand, if you could say to call it the boss, here's what I want you to do. I want you to liberate yourself for a little while and speak about the vision. When this place matters to you, and I know it does. And I know you get tired managing the scarcity. Let it rip. Have a good time. But sometimes they don't know how to do that anymore. They forget how to. They need to show.
And let's be honest, you're not going to win every time. As a good fundraising professional, there's times you have to predispose the prospect. We're swinging big. Excuse me. But when you hear my CEO, know that they're coming because they've been successful in managing the dollars. Like, we have to own the entire story sometimes.
Yes.
Because I don't expect CEOs to, one, be great visionaries. There's very few. I expect them to be in support of a great vision.
You touched on something there also. You used a word, was predispose. I'll give you a moment to kind of get your head wrapped around that thing. But talk a little bit about what in heaven's name that means. What does predispose mean?
Almost getting yourself into that mindset kind of thing.
Yeah.
Predisposing to that.
Well, Jay, as we're thinking about this, we're going to talk about an elephant in a minute. Jay, what's in your mind? An elephant. I've predisposed you for whatever I want because I got in front of you. And what predisposition means is you actually are predisposing, getting someone ready for what you want to talk about. And when we work really hard, like you got to get them emotionally ready. You got to get them logistically ready. Like how are we controlling the environment? But the predispose idea, it's actually, if we go back to the abundance mindset, it is this. I am allowed to have as many conversations with you because you want to. I'm not worried about scarcity from you. I am not making decisions for you.
Funny because when you went to elephant, the first thing in my mind that I went to was you can't eat elephant all at once. You got to break it into pieces, which is a scarcity thing.
Which is scarcity,
how do I break this down so I actually get this done? Not dreaming of the big elephant and all the things you could do, but how can I break this down to pieces to get it done? So.
And predisposition, just to tag on that, is predisposition is I might take 1,000 bites of the elephant before you and I actually visit. Okay, we're going to meet with you. This so-and-so is calling you to say, hey, be ready. This is going to be important. I do want to share one thing before I go on, and just my personal abundance and scarcity struggle. So, like we all, I grew up very lucky in a loving family, but we didn't have interior walls, right? We had styrofoam eggs for breakfast. Cook up, put an egg in a can of styrofoam, throw it in the microwave, and that's all you had for breakfast. There were 6 kids. Both parents were working. We always had love, and we always had time. We had no money. So when I think of abundance, because I grew up this way, I will always give you my love and I'll always give you my time, but I got no money. Now, that has been my struggle since day one with asking.
And will always be.
And will always be my struggle.
Right.
And now I know when I'm feeling it, I'm going in the right way because I'm getting ready for a big ask. And I go to the person, and this was taught to me, ask like money's never going to be an issue. Once I put that on the table, and I still get chills about it, and this is, and it doesn't matter how much it is, right? If you need $1,000 to help get, something happen in your local community so kids get out of bad behavior, or if you need $100 million to fight cancer, the number is irrelevant.
So what you're talking about then is that you are generally in control of your inner narrative. You are self-aware of what's going on in your head. There are no books. There are books that tell people how to raise money, and there are seminars that tell people how to raise money. I mean, as if it's a mechanical behavior, but the self-awareness of the person having the conversation matters.
Even more so, there's systems. There are people selling you systems to raise more money, and I think that what you're speaking to is that's a human nature thing, which is once you understand that piece of it and how you approach another human being in a conversation, it's a much different setting than systems generate money, or that some book's going to help you do that. It's really getting out and actually doing the work. It's actually getting out and having that experience with another person. So
and I think to your point, like
the
calling
relationship.
it out that it's going to happen, and it's going to happen all the time. So now it's when I work with people, like you're going to get to the point where you're going to feel scarcity, and you're going into the right meeting. You're nervous, you're not in the right place, because if you're going out and you're having a real conversation, they should be real conversations about really important, really big things. Authentic stuff.
Yeah, I remember one time, Rob, this is, I think, back at the Colorado College era, that one of the things we were talking about was the people who are economically and financially successful, truly successful people, live in a world of many commas.
Yes.
People who are, many development people, we used to use middle class. I know you would use the phrase middle income. But when you are a middle class or middle income person, you apprehend the world through the scarcity of a middle class mindset. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's just almost everybody, by the way. But on the other hand, when you're speaking to people who are truly financially successful, they live in a world where there are many commas taking place, maybe not thousands, maybe not hundreds of thousands, maybe not millions, possibly billions. And they apprehend the world differently. And sometimes that goes to the thing about controlling your own narrative, or being aware of your own narrative. So don't be afraid to talk about big money.
So I don't know. So I'm just sharing.
Please.
Did Jay and I ever tell you about the time we went to Las Vegas together to do an ask?
No, do you really want to go there?
No, but this is the fun part, right? So Jay and I,
edit that out.
We had to coach ourselves up that don't be in a scarcity mindset. And so we go visit this person. The plane's running late, so we're calling late. We're going to be late. Very generous person. We show up in this warehouse place. International business guy, young, probably, at the time, late 30s.
Yeah.
Genius financial guy. Long story short, he shows us, because he wanted to show us what he did. So we walk around, And we get back to his office, and we find ourselves like sitting in beanbag chairs. And the guy simply looks at us like, I got about 10 minutes. What do you want? Jay and I look at each other. We respond, well, we're looking to do really big things, and we're asking people to support. Yeah, but what do you need?
Right.
We need people to do 6, 7, and 8-figure gifts to make this happen. And, if you've ever done an ask like that, it's weird. But
long pause.
Well, actually, I started counting seconds, which is a trick, by the way. that you taught me.
Yeah, don't
about,
start talking.
Don't start
right?
talking.
Yeah.
So I think we got to about 45 seconds, right? And you're sweating and everything else. And the gesture that this guy does is, as soon as we ask, he goes, "Huh," and he keeps staring at us. He looks up, then staring at us. So, you want me to give you $1 million? Yes. Huh. Well, I couldn't do it in 1 year. Okay, I think I can do that. His pause was not the gift. He had to talk himself down from, I've been thinking about $100 million transactions.
Really,
Probably so.
It hurt me to come
And
down.
there are ways to do that over multiple years too.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
No.
but your point though is that he probably was spending the day in the framework of many commas.
Yeah.
And the conversation we directed him to, which was an important conversation, only had 2.
Yeah.
3. But the thing, that's I think it's 3.
Said 2 or 3.
I like though, it's in some ways described, I'm sure that's how it was going through processing through his head, but he actually derived his own solution.
Yeah.
What is it that I'm able to do? And how could I do this? How could I make this occur?
Right.
I want to help. I want to be a part of that abundance conversation and make a difference. And he derived his own solution. And I think in some ways, and it's another conversation another time about making decisions for our donors before they even have a
that's
chance
such
to
a good
respond.
point. Yeah.
Because
That is
giving the
such a
gentleman
good point, Jim.
giving that gentleman that opportunity
Yeah.
to work through that and say, here's what I can do, here's how I can do it, left so many doors open.
And that's what, like, if I'm going to give one, takeaways and nuggets as we catch them, that's, if you can stop from taking away a person's time to think in front of you.
Yeah.
Because we'll sit there and we're like, we try to fill the air. It's like, well, we don't have to do it. Blah, blah, blah. And what you're doing is you're stopping him from the one gift you can actually give them, which is time to think and really think. Because the minute we left, like, he might think about us for 5 hours the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But those 45 seconds, he had complete focus on the problem at hand, which is, I want to do something. How do I make that happen? So, yeah, if you take a nugget away, never make decisions for your prospect, which in a tangible way means never fill the void between your ask
So
and
was
the
that
answer.
the one story you were able to bring back from Vegas, or the only story you brought back from
Actually, it
Vegas?
was Reno, so we weren't all
Yeah, it was
excited.
one of those things.
Yeah.
One of those
We
things.
were going to go hiking.
The other thing though is that every now and then, not every now and then, I think one of the things that most people are afraid of is having someone say no.
Yeah.
And
I think we're like programmed from childhood.
we do not want to be
Oh, yeah.
rejected.
To be told no, I can't do something. No, you can't have.
Yeah.
Or no, you can't.
Where you have the wrong answer, or you didn't get the right answer.
We're pre-programmed for that.
And part of it, I think, the pattern of development officers, if there is a pattern, and I do think that there are a number of them, is that development officers tend to have very high social skills. They've refined them, and they're natural at it. And one of the things that they tend to work well around is likability. And they've probably been able to do pretty well with their lives by being likable people. And one of the things about having someone say no to you is a rejection of one of your greatest strengths, which is somebody someone who says no to you isn't saying I don't like you. They're saying no to the idea. Now, once again, we're back into the inner narrative.
So this goes to something that I've always felt was interesting about development going into it. Because we say it's sales. It's sales. But then when you go out and actually sit with somebody who's had an experience with an organization, whether it's the university, the college, the research institute, the hospital, the nurses, the doctors, you're not making the sale. You're facilitating the ask.
Yes.
You're facilitating the opportunity.
Facilitator, yep.
And so giving them that ability, you're going in and facilitating something this gentleman had an experience on in Reno. He was thinking back, how can I be a part of that? And I think that's the piece of that training that I think the people, the systems, are building that confidence that you're coming into this, you help them to facilitate. It's not you,
Yeah.
Right.
as you said, they're saying no to. It's the opportunity that
It's,
you're
it's,
presenting
it's,
to them.
it's the idea that
It's
you
the idea.
presented.
Yeah.
But and I think that a lot that has a great deal to do with our own self-awareness, which is that it's one of the places where many development officers are vulnerable to the word no, and because they're vulnerable to being rejected. There's all sorts of.
I want people to like me.
I want people to
I am
like me.
afraid of the no,
Right.
but I yearn for it.
So did Walt.
Yeah, right.
So did Walt. I mean, with
Yeah.
the whole thing with
Yeah.
the rabbit turned Mickey turned
Yeah.
everything else he ever
Yeah.
did. He got the no,
You
You
got
get-
the,
but that's a.
but he had the dream and
it-
he kept going.
and it was a big one.
one of the when I work with groups, I teach them how to celebrate the no, as long as it's a real no. No, I'm not going to give to an organization like you. I'm sorry, you're not important.
and I
or
I
no,
will
I don't
always
have
hate
the
you.
money.
Yeah.
But a clear
They're
no
not saying that.
clears up all your fear.
Right.
Because now it's like, well,
Now I can move on.
if I'm going to be with a friend with yours, I'm a real friend.
Now I can move on.
Or I can move on over here. But that idea goes back to Walt. The day Walt had a no, it hurt a lot. But now he knew the ground he got to play with. He got to focus on what he could control. And to your point, we're not in the business of sales is a process to get us in front of people. But our business is facilitating an ask for them to actually do something they'll never forget.
Now this may go a little bit,
Yeah.
but that whole concept of no, especially within development, is that if I do something, I may offend somebody. If I offend somebody, it may come back, and somebody that I work for might hear that. And if they hear that, then I may have an issue with back at home base. And so, talk a bit about. I think it's learning from that, taking those experiences, being able to learn from those things, and that to grow rather than being in an environment where that becomes a punitive type thing. I think it allows people to have those conversations with people about the opportunities that exist out there without coming back and having oh my gosh, they said no, we can't send you out anymore. That maybe it was no for that opportunity. Maybe it wasn't quite the right relationship with the right person. I need to bring somebody else that knows a partner, an ally into the conversation with this. You can always go back.
You can always go back.
Yeah.
And there's the idea of dwelling on. I would phrase would be to dwell on the why of what you're talking about. That's in the classical sense, that's where you make your sale.
Yep.
Which is what is the importance and the significance of what it is I'm speaking to you about? And let's dwell on this for a while before I ask you to make a decision. Let's dwell on this. One of the things about controlling, I think, your own inner narrative, I know that sounds terribly, 60s, but
I don't know. It's making a comeback as far as I'm
it
concerned.
may be coming back.
You are your story.
You
Just
are
a different
you
set
are
of
who
words.
you are who you think you
Yeah.
are. But one of the things then is a technique for development officers would be when we're talking to each other, and we're engaging and we're making connection. We're coming to understand one another in a conversation. One of the things that development officers don't do very well is to transition into the next discussion. And one of the things we used to talk about is you'd say to somebody, "Okay, if I put on my development hat right now."
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Because when you've done that,
Yeah.
you've transitioned.
Yeah.
You've told them.
I sent an email like that today. We got a great response. Okay, let's talk.
Let's
Perfect.
talk. But now what you've done, number one, is you've changed the conversation. You've framed the conversation, the change of the conversation. And what you've also done is you've changed the framing of your own understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That now, because I'm the development officer, I can get that no without you talking to me personally. But those are the kinds of things that it just takes practice. And everyone has a different lesson. I mean, everybody's got a different way of doing it.
I will say, though, another nugget. I can teach you any process or system or technique. But to really feel the abundance, you have to have your own words. They give you power.
Be yourself.
And I've used your words, I've used your words, but once they're mine, I can say them and I get them out, and it creates the relationship. Like I use the development hat. You sent an email today. Hey, listen, I'm going to put my development hat on. Can you tell I'm coming as a fundraiser? ? Smiley face. And so the whole idea is, if you want a true abundance, know the words that allow you to get there. And so just another takeaway. I know we're a lot of experience here that's going to be shot at people, but it is so much fun to watch when someone finally feels power in this craft, because it's an honorable craft.
So one of the other topics I was hoping to discuss today was the topic of trust.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of variations of trust in philanthropy, from the internal trust as a group, they've got my back kind of trust, to trust that you have within the type of business that you do. And I think one of the examples I was using in conversations around the idea of what a for-profit business has in terms of its transactional work with anybody that it comes across. So if I walk into a store and I buy a computer, I paid for something, I get something back as transactional. Right. When I'm a donor and I've made a donation to support a cause of my choice, it's a trust. The transaction is trust that you're going to use it for the purposes of which I gave it for. Trust is one of those things you can. It's very hard to get, very easy to lose.
Right.
And so I think that in our business, that's a little something that's quite unique. And you spend years building up that trust by demonstrating how you're using those funds, the transparency, the promotions, the communications. We built a new wing with those funds. We built a new pharmacy. We did child care, whatever it was we did. We're demonstrating the commitment of the community to a cause. And the transactional thing is we're supporting whatever that effort is through the foundation. We're transferring those dollars. But there's also a trust with development teams and their prospects. There's trust between development officers.
Yes.
And I think if we just talk a bit about that whole concept of trust, and I think even to the point of which it's like, and this gets another area which is even around, working, if Rob and I were going in to visit with you, we're working together towards this. Our goals can set up distrust. Goals that we set up for the foundations, their dashboards, how we incentivize people can create distrust, because I'm making the ask, or did Rob and I both, who gets credit? And so we want to create environments both where there's trust within the organization, but also trust within the community that we serve. And I thought maybe I just kind of pass that along and say, what does trust mean to you when you think of terms of philanthropy?
Boy,
it's a big subject, but I think getting to the,
can you narrow that down to 5 words?
5 words or less. That's what we're looking for.
Truthfulness.
Truthfulness. Yeah.
One of the things about, we were talking about systems, and a half an hour ago or just a little while ago, and systems do have value, and it's not a matter of accounting; it's a matter of fidelity. It's the fidelity of using that person's investment in what you have represented, that they will actually be used in the way you have represented it. And if the development officer makes that promise, if the development officer has no authority over how it's used, or even a voice over how it's used, that relationship becomes distrustful. And there was no voice that the development officer had on that end of it. So having systems in place that can assure from the minute the dollar walks in the door to the moment that dollar gets applied, and it isn't just an audit trail. It has to do with the fidelity of systems. And without those systems, even the most innocent scarcity manager can end up inadvertently doing terrible harm to trust.
Yeah, this is, I like Jay's response, truthfulness. So let's make it as simple as we can for folks. So actually, everybody's writing a book. I'm doing a book around trust, but not trust of the individual, trust of a team or a group dynamic. And the term I work with people on is, okay, can you define trust as individuals? And everybody has a great definition of trust, and it's very feeling-based, almost always feeling-based. Definition I work with teams on is confidence in expected outcomes. Doesn't mean I like the outcomes. It means I know they're coming. And when you can trust the outcome, that's where you can go anywhere with a prospect. I can't tell you how many times I have to go back. Hey, remember how we told this was going to happen? I want you to hear it first. It might not happen that way. Oh, I really trust you, Rob.
That happens, by the way.
All
Things
the time.
sometimes don't go the direction you said they would, and that person needs to know that from you.
And if they don't hear about it, they trust that you won't tell them.
Yeah.
Because now they're confident you're not going to tell them things.
Right.
And so the trust dynamic with prospects, it's not so much transparent, be direct and clear. And this is why your simple phrase, I'm coming with my development hat on, literally has changed the lives of fundraisers, because as soon as they can say that, now it's not transactional, it's role dynamics.
Right.
I'm doing it right now with another group. We got a very big ask on the table, and I'm coming to you with a development hat on. Are you ready for this? And if they say yes, I'm in a great spot. If they say no, I'm still in a great spot because trust has been built. Because they're going to be confident that I always tell them that. On the internal piece, there's a whole dynamic around trust building. The problem with being a fundraiser is that everybody thinks they know how to fundraise. And so if I go out and I do an expert visit and they still say no, I'm coming back to people that might think there's a better way to fundraise. And as you build this up, you got to actually show them what good looks like and have a little bit of that debate to build trust. And so, for my work, I almost always force the CEO to go out early with me and the development director. Say, okay, that was a good visit. Well, you didn't hit all, it sounded clunky and it felt weird and there was some stress to the conversation. Okay, but remember our goals. Did we hit all our goals? Because that's the outcome we're looking for. And so trust, if you can use the phrase confidence in expected outcomes, it pulls a lot of the feeling dynamic out of it so that you can actually create a better feeling.
One of the traps, I think, you just kind of alluded to, is for many development officers, because probably one of the strengths, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses, and many development officers, some of their strengths are the fact that they are, when I say likable, I mean that in a good way. I mean, they're just,
it's a superpower.
They're not shallow, but they're likable people. And one of the methods that many development officers use is to become increasingly friendly with the prospect. And along the way, changing that conversation and putting friendship at risk in many ways turns the development officer into a paid volunteer.
And I will, if it's hard for the development officer, look at like a CEO, right? Who, because they're not trained in fundraising or sales or whatever it is, they believe they're getting it because of their relationship with folks.
Right.
Because it's a philanthropic dollar and it's a fundamentally different dollar than an investment corporate dollar. And if I lined up 10 CEOs, no matter the size of the organization, they believe they're getting philanthropic dollars because people like them
personally,
and they yearn for those friendships.
Right.
They can still have them, but how do you separate those so you can actually have a better friendship? You have to make it very clear. Today's my day. I'm coming. Remember, every year, July 4th, I'm coming with my fundraising hat on. Oh yeah, no problem. Come on board. The conundrum is, if we hide that from the prospect, we're actually taking away great joy from them. Which is, they actually want to have a transparent relationship that they trust, and they want to like the people they're saying yes to. They really want to like you.
When we were talking a little while ago about not the differences, but success and significance, that we need to be always careful to never take away significance from that person.
Yes.
Because there is a transaction that takes place. There is a quid pro quo of some sort. It's not a material swapping of things, but it has to do with the person providing to you something that allows them to become significant. And when we hide things from them, when we are not straightforward with them when something goes wrong, we're violating that significance, and it hurts them. It hurts, and those are the kinds of things that appear to be so simple, but they're not, because one of the things is that when you reveal a failure, that the system didn't do something or couldn't do something, we become fearful of that person becoming rejected.
Making some adjustments over here.
As we should. I want to get your sense on, Jim, when you think of abundance and scarcity, and because you have a gift around data dynamics, right, and how to use them to move forward. How do you think about them? Because we can manage some feeling pieces as long as the data allows to support it. Because over time, the data is going to be the truth on, are we a good employee or not?
Numbers tell the truth, or numbers lie, and when numbers lie, people catch that.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. No. You nailed it right there. I think, and from our perspective too, in terms of data, it's we have this kind of the whole idea of driving a car, which is that all the things you've done are in the rearview mirror. Those are our numbers, our analytics.
Yep.
But within there, within there though, there are ways in which to be able to find those things that are what we like to look at as the abundance The opportunity is the hope is the road ahead. It's that roadmap of the things that are out there in front of us. So when we're looking at data, we're looking for things that are opportunities, the leading things that you can go explore out there on the horizon. The data analytics part of it for us, all the back end stuff, that what we've done, the lagging numbers are all the review mirror type fundraising opportunities.
Well, now you're talking also about trust,
Right.
which is with the system and the processes that it's taken you decades to refine.
Yeah.
I know it's taken you decades to refine that stuff, but that's where trust happens, because the information, the use of those dollars, the dollars spent to get dollars is something that people pretend they understand, but I know you can do that. You can do that, but that allows the person on the executive side to be trusting of staff, trusting of the business, trusting of everything, because
Trusting
the
of
numbers are
resources.
trustworthy.
Yeah, trusting of resources. And I think this is something, Rob, you talk a lot about, Jay, as well, which is that whole idea of, we talk about return on investment, return on energy, though. It's like, what are you doing with the dollar? So not just as a donor saying, what are the great things you're doing with the funds to support the causes that I'm interested in, but also what are you doing with the funds that you're internally that are managing and helping to operate the foundation itself? Where are you spending your time? I, as a donor, don't want to think that you're just sending out mailings all day long.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that you're actually out there talking with potential investors like me who want to help to make an impact, whatever that cause is, for your community. So to me, I think there's a bit of trust in the numbers, but there's also trust in the resources that you're using to get to those dollars, which is why ratios are so important yet so subjective. And I think one of the big things that we're talking about in terms of that car, driving the car with the gauges and some of the things that we do, is what we did is important and how we got here is important, but where we're going and where we're spending our time is equally important, if not more so.
Yeah, I would vote on the more so.
Yeah.
And what I like about, as you look data to use forward, right, the resource use as a general rule, nonprofits are in scarcity mindset, like crazy. And I do it too with my little company, right? Our company is all based on stuff, but I'm still a guy who grew up middle income, and I want to be cautious around dollars. Problem is, if you don't know the data around where good value is moving forward, you're going to be stuck in that scarcity mindset, making the same investments where you do, I don't know.
Worse, you're not spending the money.
You're not
Right.
spending the money
and you're
on
not able
smart
to
investments.
transition to another level or another state.
Yeah.
Right.
When earlier, Jim, I know you brought into this conversation today a major theme, which has to do with trust. A major theme. When we set these, I guess you can call them predictive measurements, leading indicators, whatever we want to call these things. Human nature, everyone is afraid of being quantified. We are, because number one, we don't know what the roots of a particular quantification are. I mean, was this something that they thought of like in the shower that morning? How meaningful is this?
Yeah.
But the other is, usually people become fearful of having anything that they do quantified by another person, and implicitly, trust is at risk once you start to do that. But if the relationship between, let's call it the executive and the professional fundraiser, and then the predictive numbers, that little triangle, if they can be phrased in such a way that all I want to do when numbers are not turning out the way we want, what can I do to help you? I am not judging you. I just want to be able to help you. And now we can talk about why these aren't happening. And that's terribly important, is the phrasing of what these predictive indicators are. The infamous why. And rarely, when we come up with performance indicators, KPIs, whatever, bananas, whatever we want to call them, rarely is the why explained. And at the gut level, everyone becomes afraid. And the minute somebody gets in trouble, trust is gone. And so, I mean, the human dynamics are so important.
Yeah, I really like that. And this may be something unfold later, but it's, we're so used to looking at statements, the line items.
Yeah.
And we look at the the ratios, the
Your
EBITDA,
numbers are
the
down,
EBITDA,
Bob.
whatever it is we're looking at, but no one ever explains the why.
Yeah.
And I think that it goes to another conversation around, understanding the financial aspects of fundraising. Why are we measuring these things? Why are we looking at these things? How do we, the confidence in being able to read something? You have to have a really good understanding of that. But to go make the ask, no. To set up the opportunity, no. But I think to build the trust to say, this is what we're measuring, and this is why it's important to qualify it.
And to follow up on that, Jim, this is what we're measuring, this is why we're doing it, and this is how it's going to be applied.
Yeah.
This is not intended to frighten you or to harm you. It's that the earlier I can work with you, something's in the way, we can talk this thing through.
Yeah.
But when that happens, now I become more trustworthy. But if I
Exactly.
don't say that, and if I don't do that, they think I'm going to get them.
Yeah.
And they become frightened.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a culture of trust.
Yeah.
So I just want to begin to kind of wrap this up a little bit and give you the opportunity to kind of talk about what you felt like in terms of a takeaway. If you were watching this, what would be one of the real takeaways that you would want to have?
I think for me, at least today, I find myself in controlling the inner narrative, my own inner narrative. That's something I always have to remind myself about, to pay attention to what's going on, to be less presentive, to be less on stage and to be listening a little bit more. And that would be about it.
It's okay.
Thanks. I shared a couple of them already. I'll just hit them again. Abundance and scarcity, make it an and, not a verse, which is get as much value you can as abundance and get as much value you can as a scarcity, and just know when they're needed.
Yeah.
And that can transform anything. On a specific ask framework, ask like money's never an issue.
Right.
I think that'll free up a lot of people to have the right conversations. I'll tag on to yours, Jay. Your inner dialogue. Shout out to a friend and client of mine, Caitlin. She has her team repeat this mantra. My story, I own my story, and my story is awesome. I own my story, and my story is awesome. And they'll ask for anything because they've convinced themselves their story is awesome. There's a whole lot there, but I want to end with data forward. And I know this is but I can't tell you how much when you get to understand the luxury of being in our business is we have simple math. Math can set you free. All right, I'm looking forward. Where do I want to put my new investments? Well, here's the data. We should do this first of everything else. I'm looking at my data. Here's simple metrics. As long as you're on board with helping me get better at this data, I can trust you. Math will set you free. And in a business where we believe we've gotten really good because we can feel our way through relationships, the lack of smart data in our industry is it's scary how much opportunity there is for people to get better.
And mine is that this is our first podcast episode. I don't want to thank you both for joining us, but I also want to say that I think this very conversation has generated so many other topics for future discussion. I think that'll be coming along, and I think too, as we kind of conclude this episode, is that we're going to make available to you opportunities by which you, as the podcast viewers, can submit questions, topics, things that you feel are hot today or that are trending, and we'd love to address those in future episodes. So,
and
please,
nothing's off the table.
Nothing's off the table.
But when we work with people, it's like the sooner we know your crazy questions, the sooner we can give you real answers.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gents.
I agree. So, thank you very much.
And cut. It's fascinating once you actually dive into the abundance and scarcity mindset, you start to pay more attention to your habits and your actions. This podcast is brought to you by Cause and Solution Inc. and Peak Coaching and Training Solutions. For more information or to send your questions and suggestions, please email us at info@movingfundraisingforward.com. And as always, thank you for listening.